Welcome to Stand Up for Doctors. I'm your host, Kim Downey. Thank you very much for joining us. I'd like to welcome Dr. Heath Jolliff and Jesse Dickens. Thanks for joining us today, Heath and Jesse.
Thanks, Kim.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Okay, you're welcome. And by way of brief introduction, Dr. Heath Jolliff's training is in emergency medicine and is a medical toxicologist. He currently helps physicians find solutions to their career challenges. And Jesse Dickens is an echocardiographer and a multifamily investor. And today we'll be talking about your journeys to where you are today and what has helped you to overcome challenges that you have faced. And I think that's so important because it's in these conversations and in sharing our stories that we all heal. And sometimes I have two doctors on together, and sometimes I have a doctor on with somebody else. And just us all having empathy for each other and hearing our journeys, I think makes a big difference. So thank you again, for coming on. And I usually start by asking what you'd most like our audience to know about you as we begin our conversation. Heath, would you like to go first?
Oh, sure. Thanks, Kim. So I've been a physician for 31 years. I can't believe that every time I say it. And as you said, I do emergency medicine and medical toxicology, but I actually retired from clinical emergency medicine 3 years ago and still practicing medical toxicology and still teaching. And now I do primarily executive coaching with physicians.
Okay, well, that's terrific. So I did not realize that you were still practicing as a medical toxicologist. After we have Jesse introduce himself, I'd like to know a little more about that. Go ahead, Jesse.
Sure. Yeah, thanks again for having me. And my clinical background is in echo. I run operations for a mobile medical imaging company here in Denver, Colorado. Uh, I got burnout in the corporate landscape in the peak of COVID, and it just changed my world completely, as it did for so many others. And I left the corporate healthcare sector and joined this small company, and it really reinvigorated my love and passion for scanning patients, and it also kind of spurred my investing journey and just understanding that I wanted to build additional streams of income outside of relying on just my earned income. So it was COVID ended up being a blessing in disguise for me, really.
Okay, well, thank you because I've heard some of your story. We've had a discussion, and I've seen your posts on LinkedIn, and you've shared pictures of your beautiful family. So I love that. So Heath, though, tell us a little about being a medical toxicologist and what you're doing in that role.
Well, I trained actually in Jesse's part of the world. I trained out in Denver, Colorado, and it was a wonderful place. And hopefully one day I'll make it back there. But medical toxicology, it's kind of an interesting specialty. We deal with patients who have been poisoned, potentially poisoned. Could be exposures from little children getting into things in the household. That's kind of how the whole poison center system started. To people who work around chemicals at work, and now they may have a chronic disease that they're wondering if that could have been caused by that. And then I do a lot of forensic work where, unfortunately, a lot of my patients are no longer alive, and people are wondering, could something that showed up on autopsy have resulted in their death? And I do a lot of medical legal consulting on that realm.
Okay, wow. Well, that's really fascinating work. So thank you for what you do. That's a special job to have for sure and very important. So Jesse, yeah, we've had a conversation. I know that you shared some things on LinkedIn, about how you went through a difficult period. If you would be interested in sharing that and how you've come to the other side here and are doing what you're doing today.
Sure. Our first son was born October of 2019, so it was a game-changing moment, and obviously one of the most exciting periods of our life for my wife and I. And when COVID hit, it really just, as you guys probably have experienced as well, it just kind of turned corporate healthcare. I don't know if it turned upside down, but it really, I guess for me, exposed that ugly side of it that I always knew existed, but I had just never experienced it, never felt it myself. I was at a hospital, a small level 3 facility, and it had a very family oriented feel between the staff. I loved the cardiology group that I was working for, my staff members. It just felt like a family to me. It felt like a home away from home. And with by I'd say April, if not May of 2020, that had completely changed, and felt extremely uncomfortable at work, and none of us really knew what was going on. Obviously, there was a lack of understanding of what was really going on with the virus, and just felt completely just a lack of support. And then coming home to a new child at home, and just the concerns around that, and just feeling like I had nowhere to turn to, I had no one to talk to, and just felt completely isolated. And it was just a very new feeling for me, and it was very uncomfortable. And uh, I was able to peel away from that to join a company that went from a company of 21,000 employees to a company of 6. And it was just more of my kind of speed, and what we do is just there's really nothing outside of the patient care aspect of it. It's me and the patient. It is a business, and obviously has to be run as a business, but a lot of the other barriers that I felt like as healthcare providers we feel like we face, where it's not just us sitting down with our patients, that stuff had been removed, and I was able to just get back to the reason why I decided to go to school to be a medical professional. So it was quite the process, but I'm glad that it took place overall.
Well, thank you, and I'm glad that you found something that's a good match for your values and the way you wish to practice. And Heath, if anything Jesse said brings something to mind, and if you'd like to share a story of your own.
Yeah, absolutely. It brings me back to about 12 years ago. I was sitting in a busy ER where it's one of those days where nothing seems to be going right. And my colleagues around me were stressed and frustrated, as was everybody else. And I had kind of a flashback to when I was a resident and I went through an episode of burnout. And luckily back then I had great mentors and colleagues and friends that helped me through that. But I realized that the specialty of emergency medicine and the high stress, this is before COVID, led to a lot of burnout in people. And in my mind, I said, boy, someone ought to really help physicians to deal with this so bad things and worse things don't happen. And it kind of led me to find my first coach, and that was 11 years ago, hard to believe also. And I remember coming to her and saying, someone should help physicians. And I had looked at all kinds of things, working in private industry and all kinds of things of getting out of clinical medicine completely. But nothing seemed to fit. And she challenged me. She said, you came to me and you said someone ought to do something to help physicians. Why isn't that person you?
Mm.
I thought, oh, yeah, I knew that question was coming. And I said, well, I have no idea what to do to help people. And she said, well, if I can give you some advice, I think you'd make a great coach. And I think you should look for a training program. And so 5 years ago, I did that and went into training as an executive coach. And I've been doing it for the last 5 years. And I just love it. I kind of joke that all my patients now are physicians. But there's a lot of burnout in the field, and anything that we can all do to support and help each other, whether it's friends, colleagues, mentors, anything like that, is definitely needed in the healthcare industry.
Well, thanks for sharing. I love that. And it reminds me there's a song by Matthew West, if you haven't heard it, and it's called Do Something. And it's, I was asking, why this, why that? And then it's like, do something yourself, right? And I love that song. And I think that speaks to what you were talking about. And I know when you joke that your patients are now whatever your clients are now doctors. I kind of joke myself that, I'm a physical therapist by training, and that I traded a caseload of patients for a caseload of doctors, and I'm not a coach, but that's who I support all the time is doctors. But that's what I wanted to do too, is do something to help, and we can all do our part. Jesse, what he said, did that bring anything to mind for you?
I think the piece around coaching, or just having mentors or having accountability in your life, is so important. And tying that into how I felt completely on an island and felt like I had nowhere to go. That's when I made this shift, and I'd already been interested in investing in real estate, and kind of knew that that was something that I wanted to do at some point down the road. And then I think the birth of that child really expedited that process. And now my why, or my reason for doing that, instead of just this theory, was this 7 pound, 7 ounce little human being. And it was in my arms. And I said, okay, now is the time to take action, but still had no idea where to go. So I joined a mentorship group, and that really helped out so much. I think the roadblocks for me have been more internal than external. I think it all lives up here with the limiting beliefs that I've, for whatever reason, adapted for years and years, and held myself within this I kind of constrained myself. And having mentors or people that have gone through it before have been able to kind of highlight that for me and share their own similar experience and shatter that by kind of paving a path to show you a way to do it. And I think for me, like the ultimate antidote is taking action, and taking action that you might not believe in yourself to be able to do. And I think coaching has just been, and it's continued to be a part of my life ever since that day. And I hope that it continues that way moving forward.
That's terrific. So Heath, if you'd like to respond to Jesse, and also when you found coaching, how did you feel about it? What was that process like for you?
Yeah, I like what Jesse said, because part of coaching, I just talked to a client today and I said, part of my job is to hold you accountable for your own success. And I needed that. My first coach, when she brought that up to me, she said, physicians aren't lazy. You're just really busy, but you do have some fear inside. And can I do this? And somewhere in medicine, we're taught not to ask for help. It's looked at kind of as a weakness. And boy, we need to get over that. And I've had a coach every year for the past 11 years, and it's a true value to me and something I look forward to all the time. And yeah, they do. They hold me accountable for my own success, and I really appreciate that. And I wish more people could experience it, because coaching, I still have a lot of friends and colleagues that have no idea what coaching is about, and I had no idea what it was about when I hired my first coach.
Hmm. Well, so I'll go ahead and share a bit about myself, even though I wasn't planning on it. But as you both may know, I had a doctor that I loved, and he took his own life, and I was devastated. And I came across, it just so happened, I had been following blog posts by Dr. Michael Hirsch, and a couple months after this happened, when I was really having a hard time with it, we ended up having a conversation, and he really helped me, and we kept communicating, and then he ended up coaching me. So we did like a 12-week thing, and then we kind of cut down to once a month. And every month I would say in my own head, and maybe to him too, okay, just this one time, and then I'm going to be done, right? And then I just realized, like, I think this very week is that in a way, like, maybe I'll never be done, right? That there's always something, and it really helps. He really helps. And so I realized that, and there's nothing wrong with that, because even me, and after all this time, and I think coaching is amazing, and I just say, oh, I would love it if physicians try coaching. It would help them, and it would help other people. But still, I think for me, I was thinking, but I shouldn't need one, or I don't need one. But anyway, I totally agree with what you're saying. And Jesse, so how did you find a mentorship group? Because it can take different paths, right? It could be a coach, it could be a mentor, and different things will work for different people. But what was the moment you realized you needed something like that? How did you find someone like that?
Sure. I think it came down to having some clarity around what I where I wanted what the end goal was, what the end destination, where that was, to figure out what type of coaching it would take to get me there. So once I decided, okay, I'm going to do real estate. Real estate is a very broad subject. There's so many different facets and asset classes. So then I said, okay, I'm going to do commercial real estate. Again, a broad spectrum. So, okay, I'm going to do multifamily apartments. And once I landed on that and said, that's the vehicle for me, I said, how can I find someone to help drive that vehicle? So then there were a couple different coaching programs. I sat down with them, interviewed them, had some discussions with people that were already part of their programs, and kind of went through the due diligence process, and just kind of trusted my gut after that, and went with, because I think there were probably three that I had really narrowed it down to, and they all were so comparable. A, price, B, with like their structure, and C, with the type of coaching that they offered. And it really came down to that personal draw towards the community. So that was how the process shook out for me for that one.
Oh, that's terrific. So Heath, what would you suggest to doctors if they're questioning, well, do I need a coach? Would it benefit me? Things like that.
Yeah, that's good. I think the first thing we have to do is we have to get rid of some of those limiting beliefs. Like, it's okay to ask for help. It doesn't mean you're weak, and we can't always do everything just on our own. A lot of physicians say, well, I can do everything on my own. And I say, but we consult with other specialists all the time, other physicians, other healthcare professionals, to help us take care of patients. And maybe now it's time to have somebody help take care of you. because we don't have all the answers. I will never have all the answers in my life, and I don't imagine anyone else will either. So I say, take all those limiting beliefs, put it in a little box, fold it up, throw it in a closet behind you, lock that door, never open it, and start looking out for your own self. So I tell people, there's a lot of coaches out there. Spend a lot of time asking a lot of questions. I think what Jesse said, finding someone that you feel has that personal connection to you that gets it, and maybe has been where you've been before, and looking at what they can offer you and what their vision of success is, and see if it matches your vision of success.
And many coaches offer a consultation at no charge, right, to see if you're a good fit. And just in that conversation, they're very likely to help you with something. So it's a win-win. And I think that's absolutely critical. What you're saying is that it's okay to ask for help. We all need help sometimes in our life. Sometimes we're the givers, sometimes we're the receivers. And that's the most important and bravest and strongest thing you can do, right? It's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength.
Absolutely.
So what would you like to say, Jesse?
Yeah, I guess I'm just curious. I'd like to ask Heath, why do you think there's such a gap and such a need in this realm? It seems like, as someone who has not gone through medical school myself, that it's such a strenuous process, obviously, and there's so much focus on the medical aspect, as there absolutely should be. But then there's a gap. So you get into residency and then you're working 80 hours a week and you're making peanuts compared to what you'll make in your fellowship and as an attending. And there's just almost this gap to the real life situations that are going to hit you. And you might be a wizard when it comes to bedside practices, but then in other areas of your life, it feels like there's these gaps where when you get almost released into the wild, then it seems like there's just no real training because there's been no focus on that in med school. I mean, what's your thought on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we're always focused 100% on the patient. And, a friend of mine by the name of Dyke Drummond always says, we're taught that the patient comes first, but that's not true when you've left the bedside. When you're at the bedside and trying to really be with the patient and the family, that's true. But when you leave, you've got to be a healthy person at home and in your own life, or else you can't take care of other people. But we're just not taught that. We're, like you said, you're working 80 hours a week, you're not eating well, you're not sleeping well. You look around you and you don't see anyone else asking for help. And then you get out and you've done this, 4 years of undergrad, 4 years of medical school, maybe 4 years of a residency program. And I find people get out in about their fourth or fifth year out as an attending and they think, okay, what's next? And it's like, well, there's no next. You're just going to be doing this for 20 or 30 years. And I think we're really unprepared for that because our mind is always looking. Most physicians I know are lifelong learners, like a lot of people, but it's always like, okay, what's the next thing? And there just isn't that next thing for a lot of people. And so it gives a lot of gaps. And then to get back to your coaching thing, I'm amazed that now we're starting to see some papers published in some leading medical journals on coaching. And I laugh a little bit because those same studies and things were published in business journals and things for years before, because I have friends that are in private industry and they're like, oh, part of my benefits package is coaching. Why isn't that in physicians' benefits package? And I'm like, good question. Why is it not? So I think there's just a big gap of everything is about learning and taking care of the patient, which is great, but we've got to be healthy ourselves or else we can't take care of other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And just speaking to the areas that you were both trained, so in emergency medicine, I just want to thank you for everything that you've done for patients and the lives that you save. Because I've spoken with emergency room physicians who have said that they go to work and not knowing if they make a difference and that they rarely get a thank you. And you're literally saving people's lives every day. So I just wanted you to take in a real thank you and appreciation is that you made such a difference and you saved people's lives, like really. And then to Jesse, I'd like to say you could explain a little more to people what an echocardiographer does, because there's a lot of people behind the scenes that you make a difference too. And I've said things about like pathologists and radiologists, right? That you guys are all behind the scenes and nobody thinks about the important roles that you play as well. So why don't you tell us a little about what you do as an echocardiographer?
Sure. So an echocardiographer takes ultrasound images of the heart. So we are usually chasing either coronary artery disease, congestive heart failure, maybe fluid around the heart. I mean, that's something that Heath has probably come across quite a bit. Effusions or tamponade, valvular disease. If primary care will refer physicians for or refer patients because of murmurs or edema. So stuff along those lines. So we are kind of the first set of eyes on what's going on structurally with the heart, as far as the muscle and the valve. And one of the really cool aspects of it, for me at least, is building a relationship with the cardiologist. I've been called in, in the middle of the night and been FaceTiming with a physician at 1 a.m. and saying, hey, I think they need to get tapped. I think they need, to get this fluid drained, and then been in the cath lab with them 2 hours later, helping out with that imaging. And it's just really cool to build that rapport. And it takes time with cardiologists, especially when you're newer and coming out of school. They want to see kind of what you're made of and what your thought process is. But it's really cool to be kind of that first line of defense to put eyes on the heart, and obviously such a critical component of the human body.
Yeah.
Well, even as we're speaking to this, I think that I wasn't thinking that it might have been an electrocardiographer. So my mom ended up needing is it called pericardiocentesis, where they have to stab you in the chest, right? So it would have probably been an echocardiographer that determined that she needed that, right? So then, yeah, so somebody like you saved my mom's life. So thank you very much.
Of course. Well, hey, I just want to say thank you to you for taking that experience that you had. That was obviously a very tough experience for you, and you leaned into that and said, there's something here, and you've gone on this path of exploration to find out how you can make an impact because of that. And that, I think, is just such a special thing to do. So I just wanted to give you a kudos for that, Kim.
Well, thank you, Jesse. I appreciate that very much. And would you each like to speak any more to any challenges that you've faced in your life and what has helped you? Heath, does anything come to mind?
Yeah, I think for other physicians or people that are looking at that, I think networking is a big thing also in medicine, but with outside of medicine, because we're usually pretty good about knowing physicians and that. But once we get out, especially if you're looking at possibly changing a career at some time, get to know all the people at your hospital, get to know people in your neighborhood, get to know people in professional organizations. I carry a business card, both electronic and paper, with me all the time because I never know who I'm going to run into or that. Also on LinkedIn is a great way to look at that. And kind of throw away those limiting beliefs that we talked about before, because they really do hold us back. Like Jesse said, all the big obstacle is in your head. It's usually not outside, because I find there are tons of people out there willing to help you. And I appreciate people like you being a big advocate for us. That speaks a lot.
Well, thank you, Heath. And I think the networking, it is so important. And I know something that physicians say is when you're a resident in a medical school, you have a group of people around you and you have, friends and you're all looking out for each other. And then when you're like kind of dumped into being an early career attending, that oftentimes you're like alone and you're siloed. So I think it's very important then to do that networking, right? To find other people that that can support you and that you can support in turn as well. Jesse, did anything he say bring something to mind, or would you like to share anything else that's helped you overcome challenges that you faced?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what he said. And just to piggyback on that we think of networking as usually a professional component, and giving out your business card, having a presence on LinkedIn. And for the most part, it is, but we also never know what any relationship in our life could turn into down the road, and how you can support someone else, how someone else can support you. And I think the more that we have these conversations and get away from the surface level, kind of what do you do and all that, and get really down to the nitty gritty. I'm an extremely transparent person, and I love to just kind of be an open veil, and talk about family stuff, and and the heartaches and all of it on top of everything else that the conversation initially started with. And when you do that, and for me, I think it provides a safe space for people to feel like they can talk about that stuff as well. And I think the more that we get into those kind of deeper conversations, you realize how similar we are, and you start to lose that feeling of isolation. And you realize that the thoughts that you're having and the struggles that you're having are not, you're not the first one to have them. And it's actually more common than most people would like you to believe in. You look around on social media, and it looks like everyone's living their best life, and the truth is that there's a lot of pain, unfortunately, going on underneath that. So I think it's just important to be truthful and authentic and genuine in all your affairs.
Yeah, absolutely. I fully agree with that. And that brings to mind, so at one point I recorded an episode with my friend Pat Dunstan, and she was a nurse and she became a lawyer and she had to stop practicing because of Parkinson's. And it was very, very difficult. She shares in the episode that growing up for her, you were kind of defined by what you do. And she was a nurse, that she was a lawyer. And she's like, if I'm not, or, a nurse or a lawyer, like, what am I? And that was very, very difficult for her. And it brought to her mind now that when she meets people, that specifically what you said, Jesse, that you aren't defined by what you do and by what you do. And she more asks, like, what are your hobbies or who's in your family? Something like that. So it doesn't reinforce that you're defined by what you do.
Yeah, very, very well said.
Absolutely.
It's more who you are and the impact that you can have. So
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Sure. So Heath, if there's any other words that you would like to share with our audience, or if you had any more top tips for your colleagues, whether they're attendings or even medical students.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you brought that up because I coach everyone from medical students to physicians that have been retired for quite some time. And there's a big need out there for the young people in our profession to have that mentorship and those friends and colleagues that they're going to have for a long period of time. Like you said, once you get out as an attending, and you kind of feel alone because you don't have a whole class with you anymore. And if anybody out there, if I can help you in any way, please get in touch with me and keep listening to Kim because her advocacy, honestly, is just great. And I've learned a lot just from the guests that you've had on here.
Oh, well, thank you, Heath. I appreciate that. And how can our listeners get in touch with you?
They can get in touch with me through my website if they like, and that is physiciancoachingsolutions.com. And I'm happy if you like, I can always, or you can hit me up on LinkedIn also.
Okay, fantastic. And Jesse, is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience? And also, do you have any suggestions for patients who wish to support their doctors?
uh, yeah, I mean, I guess just hammering home the idea that feel free to reach out and ask for help. What Heath is doing is fantastic for physicians to say, I've been there. This is what I've done to escape kind of that internal rat race that you fall into, and it's a great resource to have. And in my focus is more on the financial side of things. Of hey, if this is you love doing what you do in the medical field, but you also want to start to build your freedom financially outside of that. So the day you stop working doesn't mean that the paychecks stop coming in. That's what my focus is, and I think it's important to just to realize that there's people to talk to for all these different aspects. As far as supporting your physicians, I think you had mentioned it earlier with a physician who had referenced I show up and sometimes I don't even know if I'm making a difference. I think that words from a patient are very impactful. So whenever I'm with a family member and if we have to be in the healthcare system, I always want to say to the physicians or even just the medical providers, just look them in the eyes, say, hey, thank you for everything that you do, and it really we really appreciate it. And I think coming from the inside and understanding that at times it can feel almost like a thankless job, any small words like that can go a really, really long way with medical professionals.
I agree 100% that a thank you in any way you choose to give it can be more than you'll ever know. So thanks for spotlighting that. And how can our listeners get in touch with you, Jesse?
Sure. My company is wealthcarecap.com, so you can learn more about the stuff that we're doing there. But to get a hold of me, the best way is to reach out directly. So Jesse, Jesse, at wealthcarecap.com is the best way to get a hold of me if anyone wants to chat about any of this stuff.
Okay, well, thank you. And Heath, did you have anything to add as far as how patients can support their doctors?
Oh, I agree with what Jesse said, but I'm also give you a thank you, Jesse, because I'm sure you get calls a lot from the emergency department, and it's not at 2 in the afternoon. It's probably more like 2 in the morning. It just always
Yep.
is. And
Yeah.
I have always really appreciated everybody that helps me because I can't do my job alone. And just what Jesse said for patients, and ask questions, because I never like a patient to leave and feel like they didn't get the information they wanted to. So if you don't, remember, we're not perfect, and sometimes we speak above your head as healthcare professionals, and just stop us and just say, "Hey, doc, I just don't really understand what you're saying," and make me pause and say it again in a different way, because I want my patients to be able to understand what's going on with their healthcare picture.
Hmm. Well, that's great. Well, just thank you again both for everything that you've done and continue to do for your patients and your colleagues. And I just love sharing all of these stories. And so in closing, to move the needle in healthcare, we all need to raise our voices and we all need to care about each other. We already know that doctors need to care about patients. Patients need to care about doctors too. So stand up, doctors, and let's stand up for doctors.
Thanks, Kim.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Okay, thanks. You're welcome.